Good afternoon, everyone. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Dave Owens. And Jeff also has not only a larger, a better history as a wholesaler, but he also has a much larger vocabulary because I don't know what dubious means. Dubious distinction. I should know that. Thinking about how your brain works. And it says at the top, there's a subtitle, 6 Common Investing Mistakes. Let's talk about a mistake for a moment. Have any of you in this room prepared an email or a text and sent it and then immediately said, no? Well, 2 hours ago, I was sending text messages to my wife and to Elena Flores Priest. And I was replying to my wife. However, I was replying to Elena. Okay, thanks. Love you, honey. So Jeff almost took me outside to go to blows for hitting on his wife. Fortunately, it was a mistake. Yet, immediately, the emotions ran up, you get nervous, and then you try and fix it. Oh, really sorry, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. And Elena got a great laugh out of it. But what happens is that when we become highly emotional, we tend to make decisions that we otherwise would not. So let's start with a pop quiz, and if we could all do this together. Buy, sell, thank you. That is a fundamental principle of investing that we all know. However, it isn't too easy to follow that principle when you run hot, if you will. So the brain, there are 3 levels, but the hominid part of your brain is rational reasoning. Really, we are the only living product that has that. Everything else has reptilian. They have other levels, but they don't get to this real emotional and rational and reasoning state. But when you're in a stressful situation, that part of your brain actually shuts down. The blood leaves that part of the brain because you get into survival mode. Fight or flight, probably all heard that term. Think about, now you all look like a very even-keeled group, except maybe you, Paul, in the front. Think about a time when you're highly emotional and you said something to a loved one and you regret it. Has that ever happened to you? That's happened to me. Would you have ever thought to say that at a time when you were calm, cool, and collected? I'm going to have to say you wouldn't, unless you were a cruel person. When we become emotional, we do things that we would never do in a rational, logical time. So I'm going to quickly talk about heuristics, very quickly. Heuristics, it's just snap judgment. You go in and it shows you there, if you have that many options of clothing, it could take you weeks to decide what to wear that day, even if you just took 1 second to look at each option. You just put your clothes on and go. Now, some of you might be looking at your spouse, or possibly Sal's looking at his daughter and saying, you know, it might take you, I don't know, maybe someone does take a little while to get ready. My wife accuses me of it. And we, a lot of times, have this in our mind when it also comes to investing, snap decisions. Okay, so we're going to talk about 6 things very quickly that I think are all relevant. First is loss aversion. If you think about gambling, you double down. The euphoria of winning lasts a very short time relative to the pain of losing. We try to avoid loss at all costs. We do not embrace something that is painful. So if you have loss aversion and how to remedy it, here are some of the points. You have to expect volatility. And you can't just prepare for it, you have to know that it's going to happen. And I think one of the most important things to do is to involve someone who is impartial, is not emotional about these investment decisions, and can talk you through loss aversion. Anchoring. Anchoring is locking in or anchoring a belief in something that most recently happened to you that tends to influence what you believe and what you think. So if you take a look here, we're going to go to this one. Can anyone tell me what this chart looks like? What year? 2008. So that was a crash of 74. And if you look at what it looks like in the grand scheme of things, it's quite small. However, people in the 70s remembered that for a long, long time. And they missed a wonderful investment opportunity. So anchoring, you've got to keep an open mind. You've got to get outside opinions and recommendations and realize that there are other ways to look and think at things. Barn door closing. If you've not heard of this before, it's the horse runs away, so now you close the barn. It's too late. My barn door closing story, my wife, who at that time was my girlfriend, we went on a motorcycle ride. She had never been on a motorcycle before. I told her I'd been riding for 20 years, and we happened to get into an accident that day. We did go to the emergency room, but we walked away. Neither of us was wearing a helmet. Neither of us was wearing any sort of protective gear. We were in shorts, and t-shirts, and flip-flops. I see some of you shaking your heads thinking, why is that moron out in front of me right now talking about something and he doesn't, something so stupid? Well, now what do I do? I wear a helmet. Barn door closing. The accident could have been much worse, and the helmet could have saved our lives. We got lucky. But now, I wear all the protective gear, and that is something that takes place in investing. After the fact, you start making decisions. So here, there's a lot of information. So what it shows is, pardon me, investors have placed money in particular areas after they've done well. And investors pull money out of an investment after it's done poorly, just before it's about to. By the way, again, this is my brain made me do it. I'm not pointing any fingers and saying, how did any of you here or anybody make these kind of decisions? Remember, going back to loss aversion, going back to some of these things, this is how we are wired. We don't want to embrace pain, we want to avoid it. We anchor our beliefs in something that makes us feel better, and so when the markets continue to go up, we continue to buy things. Now, when we wrap up, we'll just kind of summarize a couple things that I think are important to consider. But that is why you have someone who's impartial, so that these decisions that are made at an emotional time, there ends up being logic and reason and rationale for why you're placing money in this investment and not this investment. So so they refer to this part also as hindsight, not barn door closing. Remember that you did the best you could, and I think this, write a letter to yourself. Why would you? Now you write a letter to yourself with your financial advisor, talking about your long-term goals and what you want to accomplish. Again, you have to write that when you are in a very calm emotional state, not a highly emotional state. Because logic and reasoning will win out, and if it's written during that time, you can go back to that in times of extreme stress. So one of the greatest recommendations that we have, and it would really be, if there was one takeaway from all of this information, it would be to write that letter to yourself with your financial advisor. Availability. People tend to believe what they hear. You got to remember that media is not always correct. Back in the early 80s, it was told to the public that Audi vehicles were dangerous because supposedly they jumped when they were in park. So Audi almost went bankrupt due to this one story because of the availability of information to the public. If you look at these Time magazine covers and see some of the titles, what decade does that look like? Could it be this decade? By the way, these are all covers from the 70s. As Mark Twain said, history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes. There are similarities year in, year out, decade in, decade out. So you can't believe everything you hear. Experts are sometimes wrong. Talk to someone that you trust. So here are a few final points. Again, going back to the beginning, we are wired to make certain decisions. We are wired to act in a certain way when we are highly emotional. That is how we have been for thousands and millions of years. What we need to remember is that there are warning signs, the warning signs that you might have in your own life, like anchoring, like barn door closing, which is hindsight, and have that plan in place. And remember that there are other opinions and views that are valid beyond yours, as well as the media. The media does still have to sell airtime and papers and space, and that sells. Things to consider. Again, write things down. To me, that is one of the greatest things to consider. I would recommend that to everyone. My father, who is an attorney, used to write contracts with his children. Even at age 6, I would have to sign a contract with my dad over an agreement that we made. And I would say, "Do you not trust me, Dad?" He said, "My dear son, we don't write things down because of a lack of trust. We write things down so that we remember what we said and what we agreed upon." And then he probably said to my mother, "And so that kid won't try and weasel out of this agreement," right? But I think that that's crucial. Of course, know that your portfolio will move over time. And finally, please make an appointment with your financial advisor to help you achieve your goals. I want to say thank you so much to all of you, and also to Flores Wealth Management for having me today. Thank you very much.